then you're looking at a family, and you might have your hand on a child or holding the hand of a wife while you're pushing the husband, and the crowd absorbs the husband, and now you've lost the husband. You can't find him, but you have your hands holding this child and this wife, and now they're separated. The fact that you had big defense companies that made billions and billions of dollars over the years, the fact that they didn't have an exit strategy for their employees is a failure. Do the right thing. Step in, give support to our allies that fought with us for 20 years, and give them a helping hand before this hotbed of terrorists is born again within Afghanistan. We as the United States preach this, that we stand for humanity, we stand for freedom, yet we gave the keys to the terrorists and said, here's your house, have fun, enjoy it, this is your playground now. We won't interfere. And that's the message that we gave to the world.
Tell us a little about your military history.
I retired after 21 years from the Air Force in 2018. When I was in the military, I flew combat search and rescue missions as a door gunner and a flight engineer on the HH-60 Pavehawk. Did that for around 10 years. And then I assessed and was selected for the 6th Special Operations Squadron as a combat aviation advisor, flying foreign aircraft. I was qualified on the Mi-17, it's a Russian helicopter. And so I was assigned Mi-17 as my primary and the Huey as my secondary aircraft. From that point on, 2 years of training. Once I finished up with the pipeline, I was assigned to go to Afghanistan with the Special Mission Wing and stand up that unit and take it from an air interdiction unit to a counter-terror and counter-drug operation. So it was in its infancy stages, but we built it off of partner nation capability, and we utilized former 160th Task Force pilots and a few other contractors. And we built a rigorous training pipeline for them and turned them into the premier flying unit in Afghanistan. Continued that advising and assisting mission asset to where my role was to go out with them on missions for whether it was drug raids or counter-terror raids, and kind of be that peace of mind for them until they could get their feet under them. Around 2015, 2016, we kind of turned that program completely over to them, and they took the helm, and they continued those operations all the way up until the fall of Kabul. After I retired in 2018, I went back as a private contractor and continued training Special Mission Wing personnel on how to fly the Mi-17 and also the HH-60 Blackhawk that they had just acquired. The training and the program were excellent. While we had that as contractors, the Army had oversight of everything that we were doing, and then the Afghan leadership and the Special Mission Wing, they operated all missions on their own, and they did a fantastic job at it. And they are some of the most dedicated people I've ever worked with, and ever had the privilege to be considered family with. And the relationship that we had between the ground units, the ground commandos, whether it be 222, 333, Katakas, all of them, they were just phenomenal. And that working relationship was built off of trust. SMW trusted them, and those guys trusted the SMW. So anytime a mission did come down, they executed it immediately, and with a shit ton of bravery. I've lost more partner nation guys than I have on the U.S. And the last best of the best was shot down in March of 2021. His name was Rahimi, and he was, you wouldn't, if he was standing next to me right now today, you wouldn't be able to tell if he was an American or an Afghan. And that was the dedication that they had. They fought for us with the interests of the U.S. and coalition around the world. They weren't only just fighting for Afghanistan, they were fighting for us. And instead of me having to go out and do that mission, they're going out and doing those missions. And of course, they're not with us today. And we owe them a debt of gratitude. We owe that family and all of the Commandos that promise that we made to them, which is, you stand by us, we're going to stand by you, and we're going to bring you home. And we have yet to bring them home. We abandoned them. We retreated, and we left them behind. And it's a year, over a year later, and we're still here. And they're still over there, begging for us to do something to help them. Their families are starving, and they're being hunted every day. So what brought me to go back into Kabul in August, when I left in May as a contractor, I had to lie to my Afghans and tell them, hey, I'll see you in a couple months, knowing full and well that this mission was ended. July timeframe came, we had a plan, and that was to bring families in, bring them on post to HKIA, get them put up in the barracks, be able to take care of those families so that the commandos and the pilots and the special mission wing guys could go out and fight without having to worry about their families being kidnapped. Unfortunately, we gave up Bagram pretty quickly, and that opened a door for Taliban. Taliban saw that, and they started rolling. So by the time we were ready to execute that plan of getting families put on base, it was too late. The phone call that I received was from a few Special Mission Wing commanders that said, Travis, we've been told by our advisors to fly to Uzbekistan or Tajikistan. And there might be fuel there might not be fuel. There was no plan, zero plan, but that was their best option. So these guys did what they thought was in the best interest, and they took those aircraft up to Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. And unfortunately, those aircraft were seized the minute they landed, and they were taken and they were detained. I know every one of them personally, and that wasn't their intention to leave their families behind. They fought tooth and nail to get out of that detention and to get to their aircraft, to fly back into Kabul, to fight. Nobody would leave their family behind, their wife, their children. And what happened after that is even more detrimental. By the time I had landed back into Kabul, you had ground commando units that had come to HKIA to protect it and to fight for it, and there was no command leadership. By that time, you had the 82nd, you had the Marines, taking that perimeter, and there was no information flow from the U.S. to the Afghan side. So even if you were an Afghan commando, you didn't matter. So the option to fight wasn't there. All soldiers need guidance and leadership, and if that's not there, you got to take care of yourself. And unfortunately, we all saw the events unfold at the airport, and that just created even more chaos to that situation, and still with no plan, whether it was on the U.S. side or the coalition side. There was no plan. To get to my part of going in, and my reason for going in was the only way my guys were going to move, their families were going to move, is if they had a trusted face and a trusted partner, and that was me. So everybody's hopes were high, of being able to get out, but nobody realized the intense situation at all of those gates. So even if a family was able to get close to those gates, it was a fight to go get them. So it became an ad hoc rescue versus a plan. Every plan that I had in my book got thrown out the window the minute I landed, and every hour we had to change that plan. And all the while you're receiving 1,000 phone calls an hour from people back home who have Afghans contacting them, who are now tracking them, and they set up the network back home, which was great. But you had a delay in response time. By the time I got the message, that family is in a group of thousands who is now moved. It might only be 2 minutes, but because of that, they are now lost to another situation. And trying to find them and locate them in that sea of bodies was ridiculous. All the while having the Taliban on top of you, and an unrecognizable scene of humanity. There was a sense of just death surrounding you everywhere you looked, and just people being desperate.
I heard the desperation was just couldn't even be described.
It can't. And I've tried to give an example, and I've seen the worst of humanity throughout my career, and that was the tip of it. There's no words to describe it. Anybody who's been in combat has smelt combat. This had a different smell to it. It had a different smell of fear. It had death. It had hopelessness. It had confusion. It had all the elements that would crush a soul in a heartbeat. And you could just feel it the minute you got there. And once you got into the crowds or into the masses, it absorbed you. Because on one side you have these amazing 82nd Marines and British riot control guys doing their job to the best of their abilities with no direction. And you're almost angry at them because you can't get through in time, but you're proud of them because they're keeping the crowds at bay. And then you're looking at a family, and you might have your hand on a child or holding the hand of a wife while you're pushing the husband, and the crowd absorbs the husband, and now you've lost the husband and you can't find him. But you have your hands holding this child and this wife, and now they're separated. So now they're screaming. And you can't there's no way to be able to find that other individual. So you have to keep pressing, and you push through. And by the time you do get through it, and you get to that line of freedom, you look at their faces and they are soulless. They are completely confused. They don't know where their husband is, or their child is, or their wife is. And you did that. You separated them. That was your action. And yes, you might have saved 2 people, but you also lost another one. And that happened over and over and over again. So, there's so much that happened in that condensed period of time that it's hard to be able to put that down into an interview, or even words on paper. The stuff that sticks out to me is the young soldiers, the young Marines, the young airmen that truly saved thousands of people. Without them, none of this wouldn't have been possible. You had young Marines at a gate that were taking what they believed in their hearts, trust of an individual that comes up to them, and in Scott's case, guy shows him a pineapple. All right, and he's patting him down and he lets him through. Well, that wasn't always the case. It wasn't always pineapple. It might have been a King Kong. It might have been, different passwords that we had given. But those guys went against, what they were most likely told to do, and that is not let anybody in. but they had that moral piece to them that said, I have to help, I have to do something. And you know, fortunately for those guys that worked that entry position, you know, they can hold their heads high and go, you know, I did what was right, I did the right thing. But for the guys and gals that were on the walls watching all of it and holding their position, they were helpless. And that is not what we're built on. You know, when you go out and do a mission, you know what your mission is, and you fight for it, and you're excited about it, and I mean, that is what makes you who you are. They didn't have that ability. They didn't even know what the hell they were doing because there was no orders. But again, the things that stand out to me the most is how proud I was of those junior ranks that were there, that stood above anybody's character and did what was right, regardless of what the commander's intent was. Someday their story will be told, and I could go on for days and days about my prior CSAR community and how proud I am of them, of the sheer selflessness that they gave. 24 hours a day. They never slept, and they just kept going and going and going, and saved, again, thousands of people. There's another instance that I have, and it was the night before the bombing. It was an eerily quiet night. It was windy. It was kind of chilly, which was kind of odd. I was out in the Abbey Gate corridor, looking for a couple of our guys that had contacted me and said that they were coming down the canal. And it was just, you know, the smell of shit and piss and puke and fear, you know, remains in that ground. And I left there and I was like, you know what? This is coming to an end. I knew that we can't continue this mission. Marines were already blockading different entry points and securing the airfield for departure. So I went over to the Special Mission Wing, to where we have MI-17 on stilts. It's a memorial for all of our fallen. And that was the most requested picture from all the guys back home was, Travis, can you get a picture of the memorial? So I did that, and it was a full moon night. And when I took the picture, the moon is right off the Mi-17's tail. But I spent some moments with the fallen, and then I drove out, and I was on the tarmac on our old pad, and I was just kind of taking it all in. Nobody was around. It was completely empty, and a vehicle shows up, and they pull up, and it was two Army guys that I'll never forget. They thought I was an indigenous guy just kind of hanging out because it was on the opposite side of the airfield. They figured out who I was, and you know, we sat and we talked for a while, and then they said, hey, we've got one more family that we want to get, and that's why we're over here. You know, we're kind of on our own. You know, nobody told us to go do this, but we have to go do this for ourselves. I said, okay. I said, you know, give me a grid of where they're at. They showed me. I brought it up on my map. I said, this is, you know, I can get you there. You're gonna have to climb 5 walls, but you're gonna be in Taliban country, but it's possible to do. Drove them over there, gave them a spot to go, and you know, young soldiers, eager. They left with a big smile on their face, and they were just excited to go do the right thing. Well, about an hour later, I was at the terminal, and these two guys showed up with that family, and you know, grins from here to here. You know, they got that family, and that's what they set out to do, and that kind of, you know, that set the course for multiple lives. That set the course for that family that got out, and it also set the course for those 2 soldiers who will go on to do probably the most amazing shit in the world, because they won. that moment. That was theirs, and they own it. But the rest of that entirety of HKIA and the mess was complete failure upon choices from military leaders and the administration. Systematic withdrawal is what always comes to my mind. When they told us as contractors that our contract was ending and you'll be leaving at this time, there should have been a plan in place already for our commandos and for those ones that worked for U.S. government. But there wasn't. And so many of the Afghans, they asked that question. Well, am I going to get an SIV? Am I going to get a package? Am I going to get any of it? No answer. The fact that you had big defense companies that made billions and billions of dollars over the years, the fact that they didn't have an exit strategy for their employees is a failure. The fact that the U.S. government, the military, didn't have a extraction plan built in for the embassy. They didn't have an extraction plan built in for our own people until the very end. I believe it was the 15th of August is when they came out and said, here's the extraction plan. It's disappointing and disheartening. When you can take a guy like me or Nick or any of us and go, you came up with a plan and executed it, but our military leaders couldn't even come up with a plan. And that scares the hell out of me, disappoints the hell out of me, and makes me fear of what is going to come of our military and of our government. We have a chance to make it right, and we still haven't done it. It's been over a year, and you have all of us veterans and a lot of civilians that have stepped up to the table and have taken this crisis on, and with no government support. That's all we're asking is do the right thing. Step in, give support to our allies that fought with us for 20 years, and give them a helping hand before this hotbed of terrorists is born again within Afghanistan, and we end up on another crisis within the United States that will, haunt my children's generation. And I don't want that. I spent 20 years in a war zone, in a sense, with terrorism at the front of my lobe every day. It's something I don't want for my children, and definitely not for my grandchildren. We had terrorism to a minimum, and we had freedom within Afghanistan and within the people, and we gave it all up within 2 weeks. And we retreated. That was a retreat. When you have the enemy at the gates and everybody jumps on and leaves, that's a retreat. I don't care what anybody says. So yeah, I am just, call me the old disgruntled vet, but this is different. This is when I look at disappointment in my military leaders, it's not just those that are active. It's disappointment in my military leaders that retired and have yet to speak. The leaders that I took orders from and would run through walls. I would jump on any helicopter and go do any fucking mission there was because of what they said, of how they pumped up this mission of you will do by, with, and through your partner nation. You will have relationships with these people and you will become family. I mean, that was my role. I mean, was my job as, foreign internal defense. And I understood that, but for those conventional guys that didn't understand that, but still forged that family bond, for me to be feeling the way that I'm feeling, I can't imagine what they're going through. And it's going to be a continuous effect. And that's where the moral injury part comes into play. I go back to the guys that flew to Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. Well, those guys are here in the States now. The U.S. flew them here on a parole status, and they had to leave their families behind. They screamed and hollered and said, "We need our families." Nothing. They took them out of TJ and out of Uzbek and flew them to UAE, and they were held there until February time frame, which is more than enough time to have gotten their families out. And there wasn't even a step forward to it. There wasn't even a, hey, we'll look into it. Nothing. So now we've got, these great guys in the States who fought with us, and they're going crazy because their wives and children are still stuck in Afghanistan. The members that are still there are being hunted. Everyone knows that the Taliban takes wives as they see fit, and that is happening to our people. And yet we don't step in. And we as the United States preach this, that we stand for humanity, we stand for freedom. And yet we gave the keys to the terrorists and said, here's your house, have fun, enjoy it. This is your playground now. We won't interfere. And that's the message that we gave to the world. Everything that we've done has been blocked for one reason or another. Whether it's trying to get family members here to the States, trying to get members out of Afghanistan, whether it's trying to get them to Pakistan, just so they're not being hunted anymore. There's been a blockage everywhere we go. Trying to go to Germany, other coalition countries that said, yes, we'll take our partner nations. Have everything lined up, we get to step 9 out of 10, and everything gets shut down at the last minute. And you're talking, thousands of hours of manpower and money and assets, and it's failure after failure after failure. And after a year of failures, you start seeing volunteers, and the first time I noticed it in the volunteers was back in February, March, where you had all these people wanting to help. And you could see the toll that it was taking on them. And you could see that they were losing their identities. You could see just hopelessness. And one by one, they would kind of go away. Some might come back. But you saw a shift change. There was no more hope. Every time you said, hey, we might have a way to get to another country, everybody went, yeah, whatever. It's not going to happen. And they were right, because it hasn't happened. But that goes back to that moral injury. What is moral injury? Hey, we got those guys out of Uzbekistan and Tajikistan. We got them here, but their families are still there. So I'm trying to do the right thing, but you're holding me up by keeping their families hostage. So the moral injury of Afghanistan is twofold. It can go to the evacuation part in August, that continues to this day, a year later. And it can also go back 20 years ago to the first boots on ground. Those first boots on ground did some amazing fucking accomplishments and defeated the Taliban within weeks. And they lost, a few individuals during that time. We continue to lose people throughout the 20-year campaign. And to give it all away at the very end means it was for nothing. So for every soldier, Marine, sailor, airman that had their brain scrambled, lost a limb, family members that lost lives, what was it for? What was it worth? Was it worth missing every one of your child's birthdays? Was it worth missing Christmases, special events? At the time you thought it was, because you had these commanders and you had these leaders saying, this is, you're doing God's work. You're doing what's best for our country. You are veterans. You are the tip of the spear. And now to look back on it and go, well, that was a fucking waste of time. I just wasted 20 years of my life for something that I thought I was doing for our country and for the betterment of humanity. Was I wrong? If we look at what the government did and the military did by leaving everyone behind and withdrawing, then I was. But if I'm right, which I know I'm right, and we were doing great things, you have these badass veterans and civilians that still know what right looks like, and they're continuing to do it. And whether that's supporting Afghans in a financial state, with immigration assistance, medical assistance, moving them from one location to another to keep them safe, that's right. And in my heart of hearts, I know that, the 20-year war, not all of it was worth it, but the humanity that came out of it was a generation of freedom-loving people that were able to enjoy education, enjoy love, marriage, and happiness, and prosperity. There was more opportunities that were built in Afghanistan in 20 years than you've seen in a lot of places. And they'll never forget it. There's the American tribe, as the Afghans say it, within Afghanistan that we built, that we created. And we owe it to them to fulfill that obligation and give them the opportunities to keep thriving, whether it's in Afghanistan or in another country. For those of us that continue doing this, there's the black hole that we live in, and call it the moral injury hole if you want. But it's filled with despair, it's filled with guilt, and it's filled with a loss of identity. Nobody should wake up every morning thinking about who they lost or how they need to get somebody some help. You should be waking up in the morning grateful to be waking up in the morning, correct? You shouldn't be going to sleep at night with haunting thoughts of murder, rape, and disgusting shit that goes on because we left. And nightmares are one thing, but to live it daily and throughout the day with no break in sight, because nobody from our government wants to step up. When you have eager, willing volunteers asking for help, the veteran community is going to never be able to look at their children and go, yeah, we won. We did great in Afghanistan. It's always going to be a sheltered conversation from now on. Before the fall of Kabul, you could ask any veteran about Afghanistan or Iraq or any of the other contingencies, and they would gladly be proud to talk to you about it. You ask any veteran now, and it's usually met with disgust of what happened. It's usually met with, what the fuck was it for? And it's usually met with, I wasted my fucking time there. Um, and it doesn't have to be that way. It didn't have to be that way. And that's not, coming from just the failures of one administration. It's coming from a failure of military leaders over years. It's a failure of the administration over years. And nobody corrected it. And when it started falling apart, everybody just watched. And maybe it's because everybody has cell phones nowadays and they pull out their phone to watch the mess go down instead of standing up and doing something. But for the soldiers and the Marines and the volunteers, they threw their phones away and they stepped up and took the fight. And protected all of those that just kind of sat back and watched and continue to watch. So I guess the next step is, how do you heal the veteran? How do you heal America? How do you heal Afghanistan? Starting with healing the veteran comes with acknowledgement of failure from leadership. If they could just admit that they fucked up, if they could just come out and say, this was a mess and I should be fired, that would take so much off my shoulders. But instead, I carry the burden. Everybody in this realm is carrying the burden. Again, when we shouldn't have to. If a teacher retires from a job, nobody asks them to go back and teach. So why in the hell are you asking veterans to fill their heads again with the pains of combat and the responsibility of lives? So there's got to be a way forward that we can look after our veterans on the moral injury piece of it, and go, you've done everything that you've done. It's okay. Because all I'm asking for is somebody to come up and say, hey, Travis, you're relieved. You can go home now. And that hasn't happened, and I don't foresee it happening anytime soon. But that's what the veteran community needs. We need that welcome home. Go live your life. And that has not happened.
And when we thought it had happened...
Yeah, right.
Right?
Right.
I know there were lots of bad moments. Is there one good moment in the evacuation that sticks out to you? Is there one thing that you think about and it gives you a little peace, maybe a small smile?
I think, the small smile, I think the again, it goes back to that combat search and rescue community, and knowing that I was a part of them, in active duty, and just being so fucking proud of them. And, that is the proudest moment, obviously. And then being able to grab, there was one of the guys that I grabbed, and his son was obviously his son. He's years younger, but they look like they're twins. And I remember looking at his son, and I was about to yell at him, thinking it was his dad. But everybody's caked up in dirt and nastiness. But that one does stick out, and I did laugh at that. But no, there wasn't too many happy moments. I left Afghanistan in an empty C-17, and to think that we could have put every single one of our guys in that aircraft, that's going to haunt my thoughts forever. But it's a continuing haunt that doesn't end. It's phone call, it's message after message. It's
Because the phone calls and messages didn't stop just because
No.
you stopped the evacuation, did they?
No, they continue to go, and they're nonstop, and they're going to continue to be nonstop. The only way you can end that is to basically cut the cord. And I've been advised many times, Travis, just cut the cord, change your phone number, move on with your life. And again, until somebody taps me out, says, "Hey, you're relieved," I don't know if I can do that.
Did you know Colonel Mike Tillema?
Tillema?
Yeah, big, tall
Yeah.
helicopter.
Rescue guy?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's out in, is he in Destin or Fort Walton?
He was in Florida,
Yeah.
and he's in San Antonio. They moved to San Antonio. He and his
Okay.
wife Kim,
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
one of my best friends.
Yeah, I know Mike. Yeah.
We were second lieutenants together.
No shit.
When I was flying the Bone at Grand Forks, and he was flying Hueys out to the missile sites.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's also in the Jolly Green Association.
Oh, is he?
Yeah.
He flew for NASA a little bit,
Uh-huh.
and then ended up. I think they retired in Florida, and then they moved. Yeah, they moved to San Antonio. I just saw him a couple months ago.
That's awesome. Yeah, next time you see him, say hello.
I certainly will. I have to take a picture of us
Yeah,
so I
definitely.
can send him a picture.
Yeah, definitely.
That'll crack him up.